Hey everyone, welcome back to the Beat Your Genes podcast. This is episode number 326. For everyone listening in the audio version, we are on YouTube now, so if you'd like to see this episode on video, come on over to the Beat Your Genes channel on YouTube. In today's show, we discuss a very interesting situation, and we talk about the many different angles of a situation where someone's priest broke the confession seal and then told their husband that they cheated. So we're going to see what Dr. Lisle and Dr. Howk have to say about all this. We'll see you in the video.
Is Peaches around?
Peaches is around. Peaches is, it looks like she's just kind of, I don't think you can see her. She's on the floor right behind the chair. So she'll probably make an appearance here.
You would know, but that dog got my heart.
She's pretty, she wins people over pretty readily. If I take her out with the others, people kind of fixate on Peaches. I was looking at her today, and I imagine she's going to have pretty serious back problems at some point because her butt is up in the air. Like her back legs are way bigger than her front legs. She's just a mutant. But she's sweet.
Yep.
Take her to one of those dog chiropractors.
Yeah, no, it might be necessary at some point. But yeah, she's a sweetie. She's a good girl.
All right. Well, is any sign of spring there?
No, I don't know what this winter thing is, but it seems very persistent. So we keep having cold snaps that I start to think maybe we're getting out of it, and I start seeing little signs of certain elderberry buds and things coming out, and then we get walloped by another snowstorm. So there's had a couple of inches yesterday. It's starting to melt off. Still February, I guess.
Yeah.
There
you go.
How's sunny California?
Oh, it's right here. Everything's fine.
Congratulations on your life choices. I'm sure you're feeling very, very smug and accomplished about that.
As the young kids say, sick brag.
Yeah. Is that a W? Is that what the kids say these days too? Yes. Congratulations.
Oh my. All right, Nathan. Well, what do we got going? Anything interesting in the world that we need to talk about? Or
speaking of choices, we've got a really interesting question. This isn't a listener of ours. This was a situation that I found online. I think it wasn't Reddit, but it's probably from there because there's a forum on Reddit where people will share, their personal life situations. And so this one,
am I the asshole forum, or is this a different one?
I didn't find it. Yeah, there's a forum called Am I the Asshole? So the people are trying to get perspective as who's at fault here. And they have really funny acronyms like, well, everyone sucks here, or you are the asshole, or you're not the asshole. But this one, I didn't get it from Reddit, so I don't know where it's from. But it's probably is where it originated from. But the title is called Priest Broke Confession Seal and Told Husband I Cheated. And so I'll tell you the story, and then I would love to hear your analysis here. I'm looking away because I have two monitors and I'm just looking at the question on the second monitor here. So the question is I cheated on my husband 3 years ago while traveling for work. It was a one-night stand, and we didn't even exchange numbers or keep in contact. I don't even know his last name. But until last month, I've never told anyone about this event. At the time I cheated, I didn't really care because my marriage was rocky and I felt unappreciated. But my husband and I reconnected during quarantine, and I started to feel extremely guilty. Well, last month, I thought I would try to alleviate my guilt by going to confession, and I told my parish priest. And he said I need to tell my husband as part of my penance. I wasn't really sure how to do that, so I've sat on it. Well, last week I came home to my husband throwing all of my stuff out of the bedroom and trying to kick me out of the house. He knows everything. Apparently, the priest followed up to see if I had told my husband. And when my husband said he didn't understand what the priest was talking about, he told my husband about the affair. Now my whole world is exploding because I thought confession was supposed to be private. Does the priest have any kind of liability or responsibility? What can I do?
Wow. I hate to laugh, but I mean, my first Well, my first thing is, gee, can you sue a priest? You know what I mean?
Pretty sure you cannot sue a priest. Pretty sure. I mean, you could definitely report. I mean, breaking confidentiality is probably a big no-no in the parish, and so reporting him up the hierarchy, to the bishop, and to redressing it within the system is an option, because he shouldn't have done that. I have this kind of commitment, this evolving commitment to radical honesty in my own life that I'm obsessed with and have written about. And Doug and I have talked about this. And Doug's sort of like, yeah, that's nice, except for when it's not going to serve your interests. then why would you do that? Just like, why would you make life harder? But even within my framework around radical honesty, it's not up to someone else to be. I think you should tell your husband to clear this from your conscience and to move forward from it. And that's my recommendation as your spiritual leader here. But if he only gave you a month before he starts following up with your husband to check up on you and to see if you followed through on that recommendation, he's managing the problem for you in a way that's just totally inappropriate, whether we're talking about a priest or a well-intended friend or a parent or anybody else who is navigating your relationship with the truth on your behalf. So yeah, definitely the priest should not have done that. And you might have some sort of course of action within the church. I don't think you can sue a priest in civil court. Not for that anyway. But yeah, I think probably the urge to be punitive toward the priest is deflecting from the bigger issue, which is repairing this situation with your husband and whether that's possible or not. So rather than go in on a big vendetta against the priest, I would be putting all of my time and energy and resources into that, assuming that you still want to be married and that you want your husband to understand exactly what happened here. And if this truly was a one-night stand years ago and it truly meant nothing and it was in a different phase of your marriage, then your husband might just be throwing a little fit over this, and he's just discovering this for the first time, but it is probably not necessarily a fatal rupture in the marriage. And so presenting yourself to him as, let's crystal clear this, let's really work through this, I don't want to lose you over this, that's where I'd be putting my time and energy if I were you. Yeah.
Dr. Lisle, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% with Jen all the way on this. I would say that from myself as an outsider or from her as an insider, what can be interesting are the fine details as well as the high concept of what's actually taking place. So what conflicts are in life is whether they are between us and other people or they are within ourselves about alternative courses of action. What conflicts are is they are essentially different perspectives about resource acquisition. So resource acquisition, or the flip side of resource acquisition would be resource defense. Like you already have the resource, but now it could be taken from you in some process. But essentially, resource acquisition and defense, that is what life is. Life is about the acquisition of resources. And so a resource that's involved here in this particular case, this is at the baseline level, as we look through the lens of evolution, there are different resources that are potentially in play here. So there's the female sexuality, there's male sexuality, and then there's the accoutrements that come with those things. There's also other things that are being alluded to. For example, there's esteem signaling. So she was potentially seeking esteem signaling from a male that might have been of enough gene quality on the analysis to look like he was a legitimate competitor to her husband. and to find out, is this guy into me, and does he enjoy me, and does he like me, does he find me, a worthy prize here, because I am not getting that kind of feedback from my husband. So effectively, this can become a calibration strategy. And this kind of thing was written about extensively by, Christine Matheson or something, that along with David Buss, whatever the woman's name was, the social psychologist at University of Texas that David Buss worked with, partially because he wanted a big time social psychologist and a women's studies person to work alongside him, and partly because I think she's quite attractive.
I'm sure that has nothing to do with it.
And he was hoping her marriage would be rocky, and she felt
David Buss
unappreciated.
is I'm sure, just a complete consummate professional in all ways when it comes to questions like that. In fact, I'm offended on his behalf that you would suggest as much.
I should get him on the show and ask him.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, did you get lucky when you wrote that book with her, or what happened?
Was the conversation stimulating?
Anyway, yeah, but the point is that one of the things that they discuss is, I think the book is called Why Women Have Sex, and and one of the things they talk about, I think pretty extensively, been a long time since I read that book, but one of the big things that I took away from that book was that one of the big reasons women have sex is calibration. So the particularly short-term relationships are often about, really, if you've got a if you've got a fancy piece of let's suppose you got a fancy classic Corvette, you know what I mean? You can get a feel for what it's worth. You sort of know what it's worth. But one of the things you do is you put it on the market, and when somebody rushes over with 50 grand in their hand, you're like, oh, gee, yeah, I'll really think about that. I'm pretty excited about it. And yeah, I'm going to think it over. In other words, you stick your toe in the water to see whether or not what you can get, but you don't necessarily take it. And so part of women's life strategies is to, depending upon how open and risk tolerant the woman is, they're willing to do that and risk pregnancy. In other words, they don't have to do it in the modern environment, but the Stone Age brain has its motivational system that's working here. And so a one-night stand under some safe circumstances, far away from the village, out on a business trip, you know what I mean, that is not going to wind up with the village figuring out what happened, is this absolutely looks like an exciting, quote, i.e. valuable potential experience that was probably very significantly motivated by calibration, the utility of a calibration process. So anyway, that's just as far flung, and I'm wandering around the weeds, but this is all gets down to resource acquisition. And so now what we have is, on the part of the male, we've got all this anger and clothes throwing and storming around. It's like, okay, all right. So now what are we talking about? So we're talking about now when I'm always amused when I hear about my teenage son, he's out of control. He threw something at the wall. It's like, that's not out of control. That's under perfect control. He didn't throw it at you, did he? Oh, no. Okay. No, it hasn't gotten that bad yet. It's like, oh, no, what you're watching is you're watching threats. Okay, these threats are being very, very carefully orchestrated and calibrated and motivated. And so they are attempting to say, if you do this, I'm going to do that. Okay. So if the husband was going to leave you, probably already would have happened. In other words, the whole idea here is you don't stomp around and yell and scream. If you stomp around and yell and scream, it means you're going to stay. Okay, it means you're resetting the negotiating table is what you're doing. Whereas if he was done, he would have just, the next thing you get is a court filing. Okay, like, I'm out. That's it. And so, so that is, I think, not uncommonly the result that some men, you know, for whatever reason, the entire constellation of the nature of the relationship, that would be their reaction to that. Okay. But if he's stomping around, throwing clothes around, threatening, angry, just to let you know, as a third party that's been observed some of these types of things, my attitude is, oh, I wouldn't be too intimidated. That's actually not nearly as scary as it looks. So anyway, so where are we then? We're in a relationship that is going to go about its business, finding its truth. You know, so the truth was what it was. Oh, well, buddy, you've got competition. It turns out I'm not that happy. Don't think that I might not shop these eggs around from time to time in this lifetime and find out what I might be worth. And if that's a death penalty transgression, then perhaps it is. Oh, well, you don't have enough risk tolerance to be able to hang in a relationship with a fairly normal female going through a fairly normal female's decision-making strategy for her life. Too bad. Okay. Too bad for you. And maybe too bad for both of you, but if that's who you are, that's who you are. If on the other hand, it's a tantrum in order to essentially say that, hey, you better not do this because I don't do that and I wouldn't do that, and therefore this is this you know, tremendously terrible thing that you did. It's, well, that's how terrible was it? Any pregnancy result? Was it a long, stern, extended thing? You know, et cetera, et cetera. Like, no, none of that's true. So how bad was it? I mean, it's actually kind of amazing to me. I don't know, Jen, interesting to hear from you about this. Given the fact that it wasn't too long ago that people were running around naked in Africa, you know what I mean, with spears and without written language and, you know, et cetera, without governments. Knowing that, I mean, if we go and we visit those people, occasional, what do you call it? I don't want to call it adulterous. What do you call that? Extramarital. I don't know what the heck you call it. What do you call it when people have affairs? Not infidelities. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are not uncommon occurrences among the Bushmen of the Kalahari. This is not out of bounds with human nature, for God's sakes. This is it's unpleasant and it's embarrassing and it gets people angry, but it won't break up relationships that often. Okay, so why? Because it depends upon what the nature of the dynamics of the relationship are. And so it's people running a complicated CV. And so for this guy to be, you know, this is to my way of thinking, to the woman who's writing this to me now, and we're thinking this through, I got to tell you, if this guy uses this as a large wave to get on his surfboard and on the moral high ground cruise out of this relationship, you've lost nothing. Nothing. You have not lost a relationship that was worth having. Okay. So I'm very sort of fatalistic and not intimidated by anything like this. You know, he's either throwing a tantrum and all upset. He's got to face the fact that, oh, guess what? You've got competitors and I'm not necessarily nailed down with 16 penny nails into some safe somewhere. That's right. I better be happy. You better be monitoring it. It better be worth it to me to be in this relationship, or I might not be here one day. Wow, what a shock this is. And so the Bushmen of the Kalahari wouldn't even blink. Of course you're under that kind of competitive threat. Okay. So now you find out in retrospect, 3 years later, that you were under that kind of competitive threat. And now I'm telling you, gee, I'm sorry, I feel bad about it. That's why I went to the priest and confessed, for God's sake, because I'm that conscientious and disturbed about that. and now you throw a freaking fit? Wow. It's one thing if this means that you're all stirred up and you're, embarrassed and humiliated and angry and frustrated and feel betrayed, whatever. Okay. And that you've got a little tumultuous process that you have to go through before you come right back to the table and everything's freaking fine. Okay. But if that's not true, then one of two things is true. You don't really want to be here, or you're not fit to be here. One of the two. Either way, if this blows this thing apart, then she does not want to be here. That's how I look at it. So that's how I feel about it. And anyway, I'm pretty sure that that's my position, and I don't think anybody's going to talk me out of it. But I don't know. What do you think, Jen?
Jen, what say you?
Yeah, no, I think he's I absolutely would not hold throwing a fit against him. He's allowed to throw it. He's allowed to be upset about this. He's just encountered this information. It's an interesting question because almost always this question comes with the roles reversed. It's the female who's been cheated on in a situation like this, and has that inclination to weaponize it in such a way and kind of hold it over the relationship and hold the relationship hostage to, well, this happened on this business trip and I can't ever trust you again. And I don't know if I can move on from this. And, these kinds of things that will continue to poison the dynamic between people after an incident like this happens, particularly one that like the way that this has been described, which really is just a one-off. And I wonder, just my spidey sense with a question like that, I wonder how many women are having a one-night stand on a business trip without some alcohol involved, without, I don't think most women are going to act, even if they desire the calibration piece, which I think is very valid. They can mostly satisfy that with some flirtation at the bar downstairs, or in some other way. They don't actually have to sleep with the guy, and they usually won't. And so that kind of distorted piece coming into things too might point to other issues in the marriage. Whether there are other secrets being kept, or other ways that you can't trust each other, or something like this is just going to stir all of that stuff up. And I would urge someone who's in this situation to look at that as an opportunity. Stuff's getting stirred up. We're confronting maybe some things that we haven't been willing to confront, specifically about this incident, but also all of the other things within the relationship that touches, and that highlights for us about, this hasn't been working for me either, or I've wanted to bring this up and I haven't known how. Like it's an opportunity to really have a state of the union around that kind of stuff. And so it doesn't in any way need to be this death knell of the relationship. And I think when, if you read John Gottman or you read these other kind of relationship therapists, they will often point to an affair as this turning point where the marriage got a lot better, because the couple got real with each other. It's like, we're not just going to kind of be pretending everything's fine and not talking about real shit here. We're going to like sit down and actually dig through the mud together. And so if both parties are going into it with that willingness and that humility, and are able to, we're going to let ourselves have big feelings and be angry and feel hurt and be pissed at the priest and everything else that's going on here. But the prize is the relationship, assuming that you both still want to be there, and to prioritize that, and to, kind of not to be very mindful of resisting that urge to take this thing, in this case for him to take this thing, this violation, this betrayal of trust, and to just continually beat that drum and trot it out anytime anything else is going on that he's upset about. Oh, you didn't take the trash out like you said you would. This reminds me of the betrayal when you cheated on me in the hotel. Like, that's the kind of thing that will really poison a relationship over time. So I totally agree with Doug that it's it in principle, something like this should not be enough to destroy a really solid connection with somebody that you really love. You should be able to navigate that in a more skillful way. And you might need some help to do that. And, there's lots of good resources out there. If you're doing it yourself, there's lots of good books. You can talk to somebody, and just looking at it as an opportunity and a growth frontier in your relationship rather than this devastating, terrible thing. But yeah, maybe find another church.
Yeah, good idea. All right, grand question, Nathan. Excellent.
Thank you both for winding out. It kind of leaves me with some questions, which is, obviously the husband is going to be pretty devastated, and it sounds like if there were other issues, this could be the way to get out of a relationship if he really didn't want to be in there. But if he did want to be in there, he's now faced with somebody who basically broke an agreement and lied to him 3 years ago. And, maybe there were opportunities in those 3 years to bring it up or not bring it up. I don't know why why she would bring it up and why suddenly she was feeling guilty about it 3 years later. Like what happened there? Was he, I don't know what's going on there. But assuming they can start to initiate discussion about this, how does he get over the fact that well, anything she tells him now, is she also hiding? Did she go, was this the first time? She says it's the first time. Was she, trolling for a date, and this was just the one time that there was a good enough looking guy at the bar? You know what I mean? How would you approach it from his perspective?
Well, I would say this. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little too fatalistic about these things, that maybe I'm not, but and I guess as Jen has a phrase, CB is going to CB, which is really the notion that what's going on inside of his mind is such a complex chain of processes, all triangulated on optimizing the cost-benefit analysis of his life choices. And that's a trillion bits of data per second. So you can imagine the massive quantity of data and probability analyses that he's going through as he analyzes this extremely important and expensive and biologically central asset, i.e. his relationship. So the reason why I'm fatalistic about it is that I know that he doesn't have any free will. So he's going to CB the way he's going to CB. And that's why if he if he cannot tolerate the fact that the horror of horrors, that she could have done such a thing, if he is so inherently sensitive about this, then he is unfortunately not a human being who may be able to traverse this process. And it's like he happens to be sitting on one side of the bell curve of that characteristic as it sits inside of males. I think I've met some males who were that way. In other words, so you could see that and it is, as David Buss's research was pathbreaking in this regard, to basically show the differences of the evolved mechanisms of jealousy circuits in males and females. So the males is much more ruthless because the cost of infidelity is higher to the male than it is to the female. Again, you're talking about resource acquisition strategies. So at the baseline of this, all that you're seeing inside of a human being in terms of its emotional and motivational architecture is nothing other than resource acquisition algorithms. And so in a pair bond species, or a species that has the capacity for pair bond type of a cooperative process, if you're a male in a pair bond, what you stand to lose is 100% of your extra survival resources. So you have the survival resources you need to get for yourself to survive, and then you have everything else that you could generate that you could direct towards DNA that's outside of you, inside of your children. And so as a result of that, the female's deal that she's making in a pair bond situation is to say, I will condescend to sleep with you. My eggs are incredibly valuable, but I'm willing to trade down 5, 10, 15, 20, 25% probably in terms of sexual attractiveness. That would be the standard type of a trading process that would go on in humans. Not in every situation, but this is exactly what the female was designed to do. She was willing to go down there. If the male says, wow, you're so fancy, I'm falling all over myself, I will promise fealty to you forever, okay? And you will get 100% of my extra survival assets that I can generate, okay? And what I'm going to demonstrate to you is my ability to get those assets through my intelligence, my charm, my, you know, how courageous and athletic that I am, how well connected socially I am. In other words, I'm going to be displaying like hell my ability to acquire resources. That's the whole freaking point. And then I'm going to give them to you, and that should allow me sexual access. And I'm going to promise you that it's going to be forever, because that's ideally the maximum situation that you can get. But the truth of the matter is, as soon as I could probably get away with it, we're going to find that my mind is going to want to chisel that down to 90%. That's exactly what is going to go on. So in the modern environment, that means some pornography, visiting some strip clubs. You know, if we dial it down to 70%, it's a mistress, you know what I mean, et cetera. You see what this is. It's a dispute over 100% or less than 100%. Okay, so women can get pissed off seeing that the guy surreptitiously checks out a waitress. It's like, he's never done anything. He hasn't bought a lunch for a woman at his office, right? But he glances at the waitress. What the hell is that? What is that about? In other words, that's a conflict. That's a resource acquisition problem in dispute. That's exactly what it is. And so the point is that the wives are trying to defend percentages. And of course, the worst case scenario is that he defects and leaves her with a pregnancy or a child that just takes off, and then she gets no assets. Okay, that's the biggest catastrophe that sits on the female side of the equation. But in a long-term pair bond situation where there's been cheating, all it is that she's looking at is some percentage of the assets. It's gone from 100 to something less than 100. But if a male finds out the female's cheating, he's gone from getting her sexual assets to not getting them. Somebody else stole them, and he's investing in somebody else's assets. That is a financial, it's an evolutionary accounting catastrophe. So David Buss predicted this and explained that we should be able to find in experimental social psychology and carefully done survey research, we should be able to find that difference in jealousy strategies. The jealousy mechanism should have evolved differently for male and female. The male should be more ruthless, i.e., I find out you cheated, I'm completely disgusted and I'm out. We should find that as a characteristic in males. We should almost never find that as a characteristic in females. Okay? So that's now in between, they aren't going to be, this isn't binary, isn't it? It's gender fluid. I don't know. 10 more years, I'll finally get
it's a trans preference
in the 2005s. So, but the point is that of course these are characteristics of the jealousy mechanism that has been selected for to be sitting at different statistical averages in males and females, but they are overlapping bell curves. Okay, so the males are going to tend to be more ruthless and disgusted. The females are going to tend to be more forgiving, but still angry and hysterical. That's what we should see. Okay, so the thing is that under these conditions of what it is that we've just heard, if this guy happens to be sitting at a far place on the bell curve where he is intolerant of this threat to him, then unfortunately for them both, we just found his psychological Achilles heel, and it's death. It's the death of love, okay? And you can see how that, but this is why I'm saying, you know, he's either effectively throwing a bluffing fit, which is what this is. You know, I mean, that's most likely what it is. It's like, listen, You can't do this. This is too expensive to me. Somebody could be stealing all my extra survival assets. You know, we can't tolerate this. I won't tolerate this. Okay. Well, that's a very good and useful display. It's telling the woman how committed he is. It's telling her how important she is to him, and how she cannot do this. In other words, that's all fair in the love war game. That to me is completely legitimate. But if this guy can't, quote, get over it, and as Jen says, he uses it as a moral club to bludgeon her, you know, over the months to come. If that's how it is, then the hell with him. It's like, sorry, dude, you're a freak. You just happen to sit too far outside of the bell curve of what a normal male would do. And given these circumstances, this isn't finding out that the girl had 6 different lovers, or 2 or 3 of them that went on for months at a time behind his back. That's not what he's found out. He hasn't found out that there's been some deep-seated, highly evolutionarily expensive betrayal. No, he didn't find that out at all. He found out in a confession to a priest, which means she's obviously tortured over this. He learns what? He learns of a little tiny window at something that happened long ago. This happened. Well, if you can't tolerate that, you're not cut out for love. Sorry. You know, you happen to be a member of our species where this isn't going to likely to work for you. So maybe you can get lucky with the next virgin with a perfect record and a bizarre psychology, etc. But you're in trouble. And you know what? There are men that are in trouble that are not going to be capable in this space because they got, you know, they got a little too much of that juice. And the modern world also facilitates the processes like this, where a woman could be in circumstances where she could get away with a little dalliance like this and have birth control and protection, so she knows she's not bringing back BD, she's not bringing back a pregnancy, she's not bringing back a sullying of her reputation, or therefore an insult to his reputation in the village. Like, in other words, this was a reasonable CB for her to run in the current dynamics, given where she was in this life. And if he is unable to integrate that into his ability to run the CB on his life, then it's really just too bad for him. And i.e., she really hasn't lost anything. It's like this was an Achilles heel that was going to snap his leg, and this relationship. That's how I look at it. Nothing to be done. So I believe that this is one of these things where some time and some cooling off and some communication either basically heals it very well, or if it doesn't, it doesn't. And then such is life.
It sounds like I want to take a look at this from the perspective of the priest. And I mean, this priest sounds like he's this lower end of the bell curve of males that cannot tolerate. And so he's kind of taking it upon himself to police the village, make sure that, you know, all the men are like him, essentially. What's your perspective about that and about this priest?
I've talked enough for a minute. Jen, what do
Jen.
you think?
Yeah, well, I had a slight response to what you were just saying about from the husband's perspective here. Like I come to the same conclusions that you do, Doug. I think of it slightly differently because my concept of free will is a little different, but a lot of that's just semantics, and the whole free will conversation is a little silly. But I do think of it like I basically consider this guy to be facing a choice. He has a choice. He needs to make a choice. When Nate says, well, what's he going to do? What do we say to this guy? How do you get over this? Well, you make a choice to get over it. And you commit to that, and you do everything that you can to facilitate the success of that choice. Therapy, you know, radical honesty, you get lots and lots of conversation. We're going to bring all of the skeletons out of the closet here. We're going to try to salvage closeness from what happened here. And then, if you can't do it, if you can't make that choice, or you can't adhere to that choice, then you discover that in the process of attempting to make the choice. But he needs to understand that it is a choice, that like that's what gets him over it. And as long as he is operating with that understanding, and this applies to women in the same situation, you know, the women who are going to feel this really strong instinct to continue to punish their mate in perpetuity for an indiscretion or a series of indiscretions. And there are always other factors. You know, is this sort of a social signaling scheme that is preferable to leaving the relationship, which is what you actually would want to do? It's better to harvest all of the esteem from the other clucking ladies in the village and continue to complain about this guy rather than to confront the fact that it's not a marriage you want to be in. That's going to happen a lot of the time for women, but particularly because women are facing this asymmetrical cost of extramarital activities. If they are the ones in that position of not being able to get over it and not being able to let it go and not being able to move on, then, you know, that is telling us very much so that this marriage just doesn't have what it takes to be a truly good pair bond for the long term. And that's fine. Lots of people settle themselves into mediocre pair bonds where you're trading swipes at the other, and you know, the partnership is just a vehicle for harvesting esteem from other people. And if that's where you want to sit, then that's where you want to sit. That's fine. But it is, I would look at this, if I were him, as this is what I would in principle need to do to get over it, to move past this. And we're going to find out if I can do that or not. As for the priest, I definitely, my sense is probably that, this just hit him in the feels a little too much. He heard this and felt a little vindictive about it. And, you know, maybe he's got some personal baggage that he's playing out in his parish, or maybe it's something else we can't know. We don't know the guy. But certainly it would indicate that he is not a vault of privilege as far as other confessors go, and that's very much in violation of his job. And so pursuing some course of discipline against him is completely appropriate and probably would lead to him losing his position, or at least getting his wrist slapped a little bit.
Yeah, I would also follow up on this. I mean, I think probably all three of us probably had instantaneously complex processes that took place when this started to be read. But it's kind of interesting at this moment to discover one of those things, even though it was much more complex than this and a lot of different perspectives. But one of the things that came up was that we are, of course, irritated and disgusted with the priest, but we still see him as somehow some kind of a bizarre moral authority and an important authority of this person's life. Okay, you know, heavens to Murgatroyd. He is useless, okay? And that goes for just about every priest in just about every parish, church, synagogue, or anything else anywhere in the world. These people are not authorities on anything about romantic processes, for God's sakes. They have no idea what they're doing. They don't have any idea how to navigate these kinds of conflicts of interest. These people are following things that were written down 6,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago by a bunch of freaking near savages, for God's sakes, okay? These are not sophisticated human beings. They are not psychologically sophisticated human beings. God, who the hell goes and becomes a priest? Everyone that I ever met was odd, weird, sexually, not square with the world. In other words, this is how these people are. So get a clue. That is not the place you go to make a confession or to examine the morality and dynamics of your soul. Go somewhere else. Talk to somebody that actually has some life experience, knowledge, capability, etc. You want to talk to the priest about whether you stole $10 out of the cash drawer 20 years ago at your thing, and you want, okay, fine. You can talk to him about that. Maybe that's fine. You start getting into man-woman dynamics, sexuality, any of your gender is, forget it. You're in the wrong place. You're not just dealing with amateurs, you're dealing with deformed, incompetent amateurs. So let's get that straight.
You certainly can be. I'm feeling resistant to making sweeping judgment about all clergy across the board here being incompetent.
It's a statistical argument.
And I think
statistically, those people are worse than the average human being that you'd meet in a coffee shop. Okay.
That's all these problems.
Yeah. One of them might be magnificent, but statistically, they are terrible. Look at what they learned. Look at what they spewed. Look at the tests that they took, and look what they were seeking to be ordained with. There's
too much. I'm not disagreeing that there's a lot of malpractice and a lot of garbage out there, but I think there's a huge amount of variability as well, within traditions and across them. And I do think, like, as implemented in its ideal type, confession sort of mimicking the 5th step and 12th step, right? This kind of like the priest is not necessarily supposed to be in this position of giving you life advice. He's supposed to be playing this role of you unburdening yourself and you in that process running your own analysis of what the right thing to do is. And, there's going to be this sort of, this is your penance and this is what you need to do. But, and clearly he's overstepping that in this case. But I think a lot of relationship with sure. But the sort of ideal typical relationship with clergy of holding space, like I've talked about before with the Quaker circles of trust, and this kind of idea that you need to be able to go somewhere where you can speak your truth and you can unburden yourself. And sometimes it's more valuable to be able to do that in a context where someone's not going to be giving you a bunch of advice, not going to be saying, okay, now that you've unburdened yourself, this is what you need to do. Let me tell you how this works. This is the prescription. I think in many cases when people are dealing with really complex stuff, especially stuff that they feel really tortured about and guilty about, finding a container to just get that out of you. And really, I mean, when you're describing clergy's dysfunction, I'm thinking of sponsors in 12-step and what a rough crowd that can be. And you're gonna put your trust in somebody that you find at a meeting who has a really checkered past and who's still working the steps themselves, and who is a very flawed human who's made horrible mistakes, probably ideally worse mistakes than you have, or you wouldn't have that much to learn from them. But you still benefit so much from that relationship, and they're not supposed to be telling you, hey, I know the best thing for you. I know how to handle this. Let me tell you what to do about women. It's like, that's not it. It's like, just talk to me and tell me what's going on. And I'm going to be a presence for you and a sympathetic ear for you. And people desperately need that.
So Dr. Howk, it sounds like you're saying that in principle, there's some ideal version of a clergy type person that would hold the space the way it's supposed to be held and trust, and not give you advice when you're not seeking it. But in practice, Dr. Lisle, you're saying that statistically it doesn't work out that way.
It's not even close. And not only that, they're not trained in Rogerian psychotherapy. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard to find a Rogerian psychotherapist anyway. And the truth of the matter is that, so all I'm telling you is this: you better be smart about where it is that you're going for advice in this area. And you better be suspicious as hell. And so that is the last place you're going to go. Those people are lost. Those are lost souls there that they go to the clergy. They are in real trouble for trying to analyze what it is. And at best, what you have is a severely, unusually hyper fastidious OCD-like monogamous pair bond male. Like, that's the best that you're going to get out of that. So and the truth of the matter is that both with therapists or clergy alike, what you're going to get if you have cognitive dissonance about where you're at in any marriage, it's going to be stay together, bow your head, say 20 Hail Marys. It's like, this is what it's going to be. there's not going to be any intelligent, diverse, open perspective about anything. So what Jen's describing is, I'm sure somewhere in some, parish in southern England near Salisbury, there's a sweet old guy in there that if you go and talk to him, he might give you a real nice space and be super gentle and accepting, and it'd be a really nice thing. True. Okay. But that is not going to be typically what you're going to see. You're going to see dysfunctional people with a lot of their own anxiety that are totally lost in this space. They have no idea how to navigate these conflicts.
But that's true for therapists.
They do a shit job.
I mean, I think that's universally true for everyone in the psychologically helping space. It's true for therapists, it's true for coaches, it's true for nutrition, for everything. It's true for sponsors. And so I don't know that clergy systematically worse. Definitely, they probably when it's bad, when it's the worst of the worst is probably worse than you're going to get with run-of-the-mill therapists. So you're more, as you say, statistically there may be more of a chance of running into just very bad advice there. But I think, people, regardless of whether they're seeking counsel through the church or anywhere else, they need to be very discerning and ask a lot of questions and shop around.
Well, I would argue that the church is absolutely a lot worse than the average therapist. It's not even close. The average therapist comes out of a humanistic philosophy. Okay? And the church people do not come out of a humanistic philosophy. They come out of a paternalistic, punitive, right and wrong. In other words, this is where it goes down. I.e., don't lust after the neighbor's wife. Really? Like, you haven't? You got to be freaking kidding me. So there is an unbelievable naivete that is involved in all religiosity around these issues. These people, this obviously has its roots in private property and the formation of churches as governments 10,000 years ago at the dawn of agriculture. So and through an entire massive, very dramatic and difficult human struggle, where we get all the way to the present day, where we have a life that is mutated so far from where it started. If you go back and you look at the original people, and the closest thing to the original people that we have today, we can tell from DNA testing, the oldest DNA on Earth is in the bushland of the Kalahari. That is we go back and look at them, you are looking at human culture. And then since that time, as human beings have innovated their way away from their nature, you are now seeing a bastardized version of human relationships now in an environment that does not remotely resemble the environment that you evolved on. Yeah, I have read ethnographer accounts about marriage on the Kalahari. It is actually amusing to look at the accounts. They act as if there's a marriage. There is no marriage. There's no such thing as marriage among the San people. This is not how it works. There's a young guy, kills a boar, grabs the heart, gives it to the late girl's parents. But the truth is, so these are little trade relationship. These are little trade relationship things between villages. And villages are basically little familial extended units of about 25 people. They're not the big village. They live close to each other, and they have interaction where they can have mate trading and other trading. But the bottom line is that when that happens, that's not an arranged marriage like it was in the Calcutta today. That's nothing even remotely like this. If the girl doesn't want to sleep with him, she doesn't sleep with him. If they like each other, which is why it may have happened, they may sleep with each other for a while, but after 2 months, if they don't want to, they're done. People can be together for 7 years and they have 2 children, and they start to drift, and then they don't want to be having sex with each other. If they don't have sex with each other, if there's an infidelity now and then, it happens. There isn't any marriage. They live just like the animals that they live with. The animals they live with, their sexual behavior is an echo of their impulses that are going on inside of their biology. That is precisely how these people live. and they have lived for 1,000,000 years there. Okay. Human beings in their social development and their culture and their wealth and the processes of the last 10,000 years have mutated us and mutated us and mutated us down to now we've got two people in, you know, and the girl's in a parish talking about this, the thing that happened, and the priest is all freaked out about it and is upset and is offended, and there's all these feelings, and they have no idea they came from the Kalahari. They have no idea what this is supposed to look like. They do not know what is moral. Okay, and so this is a tragedy. And what I see in my career, I'm 64 years old. I'll be 65 this year. I've been around a long time. You know, nobody's going to look down on me with their gray hair and their cane and tell me something wisely. That man doesn't exist. Okay. I've lived a long time. And so I've looked at a lot of people. I've heard a lot of people talk. And the truth is that one of the great tragedies of the modern world is the conflicts between men and women and our lack of understanding of what those conflicts are and how to optimally negotiate what those things might look like. And you've got all kinds of people trying all kinds of things. The open people, the freaks, are really trying to work at this thing from a lot of different dimensions. But what we find is that in the epicenter, we find tremendous assumptions that are basically grossly ignorant of the species that we're trying to help. And so my colleagues and everybody else that's weighing in on this as some kind of moral expert are ignorant as hell, and they give terrible advice. I am the only therapist I have ever been aware of in my career, and it's a long career now. We're going back 40 years. I am the only one that I have ever seen that calls a spade and says that relationship's dead, get out. Okay? My colleagues, whenever they hear about this, they are shaken to their core. They turn lily-livered. They can't handle it. Okay? They don't have the moral backbone. They don't have the understanding of the importance and nature of how human happiness works. So they wilt under the pressure. And they all wind up citing for fidelity, you know, basically fidelity, stability, you know, I mean, the opposite side of me, the opposite end of me is Dr. Laura. Dr. Laura Schlesinger, massively influential person, you know, sitting on the Christian moral high ground. The children. Don't do anything. Don't even think about a divorce. Don't even think about breaking up. That lady is so far from the Kalahari, she has no idea the nature of the species that she's looking at. She's just a disagreeable bitch sitting on top of a moral high ground, defending a very specific position that is unbelievably unassailable from the standpoint of the moral epicenter of the culture. But this thing is lost. If we don't understand where we came from, we cannot understand why and how it is that we got so lost. And so, yeah, this thing here, this is an interesting question, has interesting varying perspectives, but trust me, the last place you want to be asking for advice about anything about your romantic relationship in any respect is a freaking church. You don't want to be there. You want to be in front of some lady that's 45 or 50 years old with a nose ring in her ear and some purple hair, where she's open enough and wild enough and got married and divorced a couple of times, that, you know, that's a much better person to be talking to. You know, if she's got any kind of intelligence and capability, it's like, let's listen to somebody with some openness and some courage.
Okay? She have like 4 or 5 dogs too, and a guinea pig. And
what's that?
Yeah. She had like 4 or 5 dogs, a guinea pig. Yeah. planting trees all the time. Yeah.
My hair hasn't been purple for a while, but I'll be sure to dye it for the next session.
Yeah. Did you ever have a nose ring?
I only took it out. I had it for probably 20 years. I finally took it out last year sometime.
I just want to say I remembered that she had a nose ring.
Yeah.
Dr. Lisle did not.
I don't think you ever.
I actually forgot.
I don't think I ever wore like the hoop around you, but there were times in my life where it was a hoop instead of a stud. But yeah, for sure. That was a very important signal in my 20s of my openness and my come on an adventure with me. You got to have a nose ring.
Anyway, I got all that off my chest.
Thank you, Dr. Lisle, Dr. Howk. The final piece is, let's suppose you were in the confessional, you were the priest. And it sounds like from what you've been saying, I've kind of gathered that you would be telling the lady who's confessing this to you, how do you see the relationship overall, and how do you want to proceed that way? But give us some more detail, both of you. How would you take it if you were actually in the confessional and she was telling you? I know what little we know about all the rest of the details in this question.
That's good. That's an interesting question. Jen, what are you thinking?
I mean, is this question assuming that we're working within the frame of Catholicism, or are we just no,
you're Jen Howk and Dr. Dr. Jen Howk and Dr. Doug Lisle in the confessional. Well, the priest took a break and you just snuck in there, and now she's telling you.
Right. I think I mean, in a case like that, where someone is coming with such severe guilt and seeking to unburden themselves, that really is my personal inclination. And we've already kind of answered this already, but it's like, well, I'm going to put myself in that Rogerian space. I'm not wanting to intrude too much into that process. I'm going to advocate for telling him, and saying, I think probably eventually you're going to want to get to a point where you're not keeping the secret from him, if you want to stay married to him, but obviously understand that that's incredibly difficult to think about sharing with him. And so, just tell me more about what's going on with you and your process there, and just give her that space, just like a sponsor would, or a Rogerian therapist would, or a Quaker Circle of Trust would. I think that's the most appropriate role in that context for somebody who's in that sort of moment in life.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing is that the person ran a 3-year experiment about keeping it private
and was miserable. And it was starting to poison her.
Yes, and the problem is she actually values the man enough that it's what the guilt mechanism is the mechanism that says, I've treated you unfairly. Okay. And you also just by way of wayside being, taking in all little currents that come out of EP that nobody else would have ever figured out other than evolutionary psychology, which is that somewhere in there's a ticking time bomb on the possibility that this information could come to light in the village. And so therefore you're better off preemptive than you are reactive. That's the idea. And in fact, we just found that out. In other words, she was not able to be preemptive. It winds out that the village found out about it, and then it turns out that now she's in a reactive mode, and it's a hell of a lot worse. Okay, so ironically, so we just observed.
She thought she was being preemptive. I mean, I think she was trying to move it forward and come to grips with a process that would eventually involve disclosing it to him. She was just taking baby steps toward that in the best way she knew how.
And not going as fast as the priest wanted.
But it blew back in her face. Yeah.
Right. So that's what. So the guilt is goading her to do what? It's a resource acquisition algorithm. Okay. In this case, it's a resource defense. So in other words, I've got a resource, but I'm going to have to do some protective action around it because I've got a vulnerability here. And so, because I've violated an agreement, and this is trouble. Okay. And it's agreement that I want to continue. So that's actually the evolutionary accounting system that's going on. And so what we are doing here, like, I don't think I'd be doing things any different than Jen is thinking. I would be walking through her imagination about all the different ways that she's been thinking about how, how to handle this. And a big one that's taking up a bunch of space is, how on earth do I disclose this? Okay.
And so, and what do you what do you want from this marriage? Like, is this feeling like something that is holding you back from connecting more with him in developing your relationship because you want to be with him forever? Or are you feeling like this distance from him creeping back in? And like, what's going on with that? What is your internal experience with not just the secret you've been keeping, but also how you feel about him and all of that? She has a lot to think about and process through with that.
Right. And it's clear, and given his reaction, now we made his reaction possibly vastly worse than it would have been, because we brought in a third party. So now he's been humiliated in front of the village, for God's sakes. And not only that, we've obviously got some blabbermouth in the village that God knows where this goes. This guy can't freaking keep a secret. So we've now got ourselves, a much bigger mess, unfortunately, than the one that she was contemplating trying to manage. So that's its own thing, i.e., I don't know what, I'm not exactly sure what to be done about that at this point. But had she come to me, I would have been looking at this as this titanic battle between two different hypotheses about the best course of action. So in this case, the conflict isn't between her and another person; it's between two different aspects, of her own analysis. So it's a choice: do I continue to have it secret, or do I disclose it? And those two things are now, they weren't at war 3 years ago or 2 years and 10 months ago, but now they've been at war for a while, as the ticking time bomb on the disclosure of the situation, as well as, when we are in a trading relationship and we have not fulfilled our end of the bargain, and it could be discovered, whether it will be discovered or not is unknown. But one thing about it is that we don't feel clean morally with the other person on the other side. So, and if we're not clean morally, if we are essentially hiding something important from them, then it reduces the possibility of this highest possible point that can happen between two people, which is to be very, very transparent to the other person, and for everybody to feel fully secure. If you're in her situation, you cannot feel fully secure because he doesn't know something about this, about the actually how you've handled the trade process. So therefore, you can't have the feeling that I'm fully secure because I haven't been fully transparent. It's kind of like when you get to meet somebody and you start to date somebody, if you haven't shared all your dirty laundry yet, even though it looks like you're qualified, you're not qualified yet. And you can feel this urge to, a little bit at a time, meet out your dirty laundry. And then if you get to the end of your dirty laundry list and they still are crazy about you, you're like, hey, I'm here. And there's no place, as someone who's had a lot of dirty laundry, as someone that actually, is paying attention to exactly that feeling pretty carefully, we know what that feeling is when you're finally clean. Okay. And so this is someone who stole $100 from her employer's, her very good employer's cash drawer, probably a very good employer, and a valuable employer. Stole $100 from the cash drawer 5 years ago. And even if you put it back, it's still not clean.
This is the logic of, this is 12 step. This is why you make amends. This is why you make the list of all of these things that are occupying space in your head that you're still thinking about and you're still worrying about. So people who are in recovery will go back to the drugstore that they stole nail polish from when they were 10 years old, and they will apologize and pay for it. Like the unburdening is this completion that people really have to go through. And so dirty, and then there's the dirty laundry that you don't know about that kind of comes up when you're in some interpersonal situation that gets triggered out of nowhere. So it's like
Right.
the list that you've got in your head is not necessarily exhaustive.
Right.
So yeah.
I would say something else about this prescriptive and clinical.
I really have to run, Doug. But I can duck out and you guys can finish up.
You duck out and I'll finish.
Okay. All right. Thanks, you guys. I'll see you
Great
later.
To see you, Jen.
All right. Bye.
So always great to hear her perspective on all this.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I would tell anybody in any kind of circumstances like this from any direction, and that is one of the most useful tools that you can have in situations like this is the written language. And people aren't thinking this way. They're thinking that there's something important and glorious and appropriate and right and gutsy, that the only way to do it is to do it to somebody's face.
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely not true. Okay, that is a mistake.
Yeah, I wonder if their anxiety about the situation causes them to want to see someone's face to kind of gauge just how much they're they're accepting it or not.
Well, that's true, but it's also true that they think that they will be seen as wimpy and shifty if they don't do it, and the whole point of it is to get clean. Okay? So as a result, because they are intimidated about that interchange, they delay it and delay it and delay it and delay it. You know what I'm saying? So what I would explain to people is a really good way to do this is in writing. So one of the problems is that depending upon what it is, if you're confessing a bank robbery and then it's in writing, and then it's like, here's the proof, they freaking confessed. You know what I mean? So you could show the village if it's in writing, it's a hard copy of something. But let's suppose that that's not really relevant. Okay. So let's suppose that we're not going to be, produced as Exhibit A in divorce court, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just forget that. Let's suppose instead it's between two people that are really close to each other, where something written like this wouldn't be of any third party advantage at all. The only issue is that when you disclose something like this, you're doing it in a way that the person does not have to manage their own reactions and be managing you at the same time. Okay. They actually get to privately respond to it. And very often their first emotional pass to something could be very different than where they are 15 or 20 minutes later or 2 hours later. Okay. And so as a result, that this is it can be extremely useful as a confession tool about anything, about any conflict of interest or anything like this. Because then the person on the other side now gets to go through their own process without having to manage you or the dynamics and here you are, as you see them upset, you're desperate for reassurance, and now you're getting all upset, and now they have to react to that. It's like, this is a fiasco. Okay. The truth of the matter is, it's a much better way almost all the time to do this in writing. You let the people absorb it, think about it, react to it, go through all scenarios, let them imagine conversations with you, et cetera, okay? Then when they're ready or you're ready, now you can be face to face. So now you can have a conversation in some fashion, whether it's on the phone or Zoom or in person or whatever it is. In other words, then we can get there where it's an interpersonal dynamic. Okay?
Right.
So just FYI, for the woman who did it, I mean, it's too late for her, but if anybody's in some similar circumstances in a situation like this, it is not even remotely wimpy to do it this way. It is extremely good to do it this way because very often the issues involved are fairly complicated. There's a reason why we did something that was a transgression into an agreement. Usually there was either great temptation or great stress or some other significant motivating force that was involved. Putting that in the context to explain why we draw this out, you get to choose your words very carefully. You get to set the scene. You get to explain your internal process, and you get to explain your subsequent internal process in the aftermath. You get to tell the entire story in a way that if you start explaining, you start talking about it, you could forget it. that person is now running down the worst case scenario firestorm in a high anxiety and anger process that is useless to this, ideally. So absolutely, when you can do it, you lay it out chapter and verse in writing, and you edit it, and you think about it, and you go over it, and then you have a really wise counselor look at it. You know what I mean? Or maybe, and give you feedback. And this is something that I've done many times in my career, and I could just tell you, this is the way to go. This is how it is that that something, you know, gets to be the 7-alarm fire, not a 10-alarm fire. And this we skip over unnecessary drama and crisis.
That's fantastic, Dr. Lisle.
Wow.
It's given me like a vision of two parties that just put their contracts on paper, they review it, and then they can discuss it afterwards, instead of, oh, you want this? Well, then I'm not going to do, you know, then it just becomes really distracting to just go, you know, one at a time immediately. So it's just great.
Yes.
Yeah.
All good. Wow. What a one.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe to our channel, as it helps us out a ton. If you're a new subscriber to our YouTube channel and want to listen to some older audio episodes, you can hear them on any major podcasting platform like iTunes, Spotify, Libsyn, or others, or just go to beatyourgenes.org. Have a good one, and we'll see you all next show.